views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Our guest today is Congressman Ritchie Torres of the 15th Congressional District, a very busy time in Washington, D.C., and we can't thank him enough for taking a few moments to be with us and talk to Bronx constituents. How are you, first of all? It's been a crazy first week as a freshman congressman. Maybe you can give us a little perspective.
I'm still coping with the trauma of it all. I'm still in shock that, a violent mob could so easily breach the Capitol and invade the Senate chamber and invade the office of Speaker Nancy Pelosi. I never thought as a newly sworn in member of Congress that I would live through a violent assault on the U.S. Capitol. So all of us are emotionally shaken by it, but thankfully we're safe, and hopefully we can translate the lessons learned into security improvements here at the Capitol.
Can you give us just a little description of what it was like, where you were, and what you thought as it unfolded on Wednesday afternoon?
Yeah, so every 4 years on January 6th, both the Senate and the House convene as a joint session to oversee the Electoral College vote count. It's the final vote count in the presidential election. The vice president serves as the presiding officer. So that took place on Wednesday at 1 p.m. It began at 1 p.m. Most members were waiting in their offices because we cannot simultaneously be on the House floor because of COVID restrictions. So at 1:30, I'm in my office waiting to vote when all of a sudden the U.S. Capitol Police storms into the office, telling me to immediately evacuate because of reports of a suspicious package, an apparent bomb threat. And the Capitol and the legislative buildings are all interconnected like a maze. And so I was left wandering for about an hour until the Capitol Police found me and then brought me to a secure location. And in the meantime, there were rioters who breached the Capitol, who invaded the Senate chamber, who even invaded the office of Speaker Nancy Pelosi. Windows and glasses were broken. An officer was bludgeoned to death. Another officer was nearly crushed to death. So the Capitol became a scene of chaos and confusion and violence and volatility.
Did you see any of it firsthand? Or now your office as a freshman, you're not in the main building? Or did you see anything? Or were you really shut away from a lot of it?
No, I was in the Cannon building, which was the first to be evacuated because of a bomb threat. And so I was experiencing firsthand, but I was not on the House floor when the rioters breached the Capitol. But all of it is interconnected.
What did you hear from colleagues? I realize they're new colleagues. It's like you get a new job and you start to meet people. Of course, many of them you're quite familiar with anyway. Any worthwhile stories to relate that you heard from colleagues?
I had colleagues who were barricading themselves inside their offices in fear for their lives. You had rioters screaming that the vice president should be hanged. So I think the people are outraged that the president of the United States would instigate a violent mob to storm the Capitol in an attempt to derail the presidential vote count.
We should mention that this is being recorded on Monday, just after 12 noon. Things will be changing. People might see this at one time or another. And so I just wanted to set the time. So as I understand, the articles of impeachment have already been introduced by the speaker. Is that in fact true? And is that where we are at right now?
Not quite. We are moving in the direction of voting on articles of impeachment. We're first going to vote on a resolution calling on the Vice President to invoke the 25th Amendment, which empowers him and a majority of the cabinet to remove the president from office. If the Vice President refuses, then we will have no choice but to vote on articles of impeachment against the President of the United States.
There has been no word from the Vice President, as we understood from watching from watching 60 Minutes last night. The Speaker of the House, Pelosi, said that they hadn't even heard back from the Vice President. It's hard to say from this point, what he might or might not do. It certainly appears likely he would not go forward with the 25th Amendment. If, in fact, it's the articles of impeachment that are on the table, I'm presuming you would vote for it. Do you believe that this would be the kind of thing you'd want to see the House bring to the Senate right away? Or there's been a lot of talk about delaying, not to interfere with President Biden's agenda as he takes office on the 20th, and then maybe a month or two later or at some point in the future, send it over to the Senate. Do you have a preference of how this should go, if in fact articles of impeachment are what the House votes on?
There's no question that I'm going to vote for the articles of impeachment, and we have to act immediately to hold President Trump accountable. For me, the issue here is accountability. There has to be consequences for committing sedition against the United States Congress. The violent mob that Donald Trump unleashed on the US Capitol represents a violent assault on the separation of powers between Congress and the president. It represents a violent assault on the peaceful transfer of power from one president to the next. If striking at the core of our constitutional republic is not an impeachable offense, then what is the impeachment process for? This is a clear-cut case of presidential abuse of power and incitement of insurrection.
Would you recommend moving it through at this, like right away, to try and get it in before the inauguration or even soon after, and then complicate the legislature's ability to deal with Joe Biden's agenda, as well as appointments, which of course are going to be necessary? Or do you think you'll have made the statement and it can wait to deliver to the Senate until a time when it...
I feel like we have an obligation to act immediately, not only to impeach, but to convict Donald Trump. And keep in mind that a House majority is required to impeach Donald Trump. A Senate supermajority is required to convict Donald Trump. And then once convicted, a Senate majority is required to disqualify Donald Trump from ever pursuing public office again.
So you would move to just keep
we have no choice. The need to hold Donald Trump accountable is more important than politics.
You have not had time, I'm presuming, to make friends on the other side of the aisle yet in your all of first week in the Congress. Have you gotten to talk to any Republican colleagues and get a sense of? I mean, I only see with the headlines that I see on television, and that there seems to be some pushback. They seem to be rooting for the vice president to take the onus off the legislature. Do you get a sense of where they're at right now?
My confidence in most of my Republican colleagues has been shaken. Right? Anyone who attempted to overturn the results of our election, anyone who instigated a violent mob to storm the Capitol, has no business being a member of Congress. So I could care less about the opinion of a seditionist.
It occurs to me that you were the chair of the investigations committee long ago in the city council. You've moved 5 worlds ahead since then. I have to tell you, this is one man's opinion. I've not heard it anywhere, but it sure looks like this was an inside job. To not have the Capitol Police there, to have doors open. It seems clear that people who marauded the Capitol building had an idea of where to go, knew where some secret offices were. I mean, it just has all the earmarks. What do you recommend? Are we looking at a 9/11 and Warren Commission style investigation here? And then, boy, I bet your juices would be flowing to be part of that, given your background.
I agree with you. There needs to be a bicameral, bipartisan commission that investigates the security failures surrounding the siege on the Capitol. I'm still in a state of shock that a violent mob could breach the Capitol, which should be one of the most guarded places on earth. Right? There was no heavy fencing securing the Capitol complex as there is in the White House. And the National Guard was not even on standby.
Seems remarkable.
The deployment of the National Guard was not authorized until 3 p.m. And the National Guard did not arrive until 5:40. And by then, the situation had stabilized. But the Capitol Police was utterly overwhelmed and overrun by the rioters. There were thousands. There were about 1,400 Capitol Police officers versus 8,000 rioters. And I'm just shocked by the lack of planning and preparedness that went into protecting the United States Congress during the Electoral College vote count, which is the most important event in our democracy when it comes to the peaceful transfer of power.
Last question here. I've been thinking about legislation, maybe toughening domestic terrorism rules so that people who are arrested not only will get weapons charges and trespassing charges, that they could be more easily convicted on domestic terrorism. The other thing is taking a look at symbols of white supremacy and saying, you know what, we can't have that. Germany did it after World War II. Is that the kind of thing you would say, gee whiz, maybe it's time to do something like that?
Yes, I mean, we have to be careful about the laws we pass because if applied too broadly, those laws can do more harm than good. It seems to me that we have laws in place that allow us to hold domestic terrorists accountable. What we have failed to do is to monitor them properly, including within the ranks of law enforcement. You might remember that my final investigation in the city council uncovered that the NYPD's Equal Employment Commanding Officer was actually trafficking in bigotry on an online message board. And these message boards have thousands of officers from across the country who are trafficking in white supremacy. And we should be monitoring those message boards, and we should be uncovering the identity of those officers, and we should be filtering them out of the ranks of law enforcement. We have to be proactive in monitoring and in cracking down on white supremacy, including in the ranks of law enforcement. So for me, it's not about, we have the laws necessary for prosecuting them. We have to be more proactive in identifying and finding who these people are.
Congressman, I know you have a very busy day, so I'm going to let you go. We're going to wish you safety first. Please just be well. Let's have no more problems in the Capitol so that you can, do your job. And I know you're very serious about that. And also, if this is an indication of your accessibility as you go forward as a Congress member, everybody in the Bronx will benefit. And just to have the dialogue is just so important to all of us. So we really appreciate it.
I just want to leave on one final note. Even when I leave the Bronx for Washington, D.C., the Bronx will never leave me. I see it as my obligation to keep the people of the Bronx informed about what's happening in the federal government.
You can take the boy out of the Bronx, but you can't take the Bronx out of the boy. I'm looking forward to running into you in a deli on Allerton Avenue like we did a little while back. BronxNet Television really appreciates your time. Get back to work, and let's see if we can straighten things out and move things forward. Thank you so much.
Take care, Gary.
Ritchie Torres of the 15th Congressional District. Thank you.